I'm Jocelyne Cesari. I am a senior fellow at the Berkley Center. And we have been running this series on religion and nationalism since March. We started on physical exchange on India. And then because of the ongoing situation with the virus, we went online and we had a session on Russia. And today we are going to discuss Turkey. So this seminar is really coming from an extensive research that I conducted at the Berkley Center on the role of national, not only identities, but institutions in politicizing religion. And the work had been a comparative approach through different traditions, religious traditions, and different national contexts about India, China, Russia, Turkey, Syria. And it's in some ways an expansion of the work I did in my previous book on political Islam, and looking at political Islam not only as an Islamist or religious opposition to a so-called secular state, but as a political culture created by the modern conditions of the nation. So in this perspective, Turkey is a fascinating case. And before I introduce our speaker and guest on this exchange, let me first give you a few concrete and logistic information. This session is recorded. And it will be posted on the webpage of the series on the Berkley Center website. And also you can ask questions using the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen. And 20-25 minutes before the end of the hour, I will start going through the questions and address them with my guest. So let me introduce you to Erdi Ozturk, who is a professor at the, now I am missing the, yes, the London Metropolitan University. Sorry, you have been moving from one place to another, and this is a new position, and congratulations, by the way. And he has been writing extensively on Turkish politics and the religious dimension of Turkish politics. So it's a great pleasure to have you with us, Erdi. And
it's an honor for me to share with you the same screen, Justin. Thank you so much for having me.
You are welcome. So before we start our exchange, I want to say to our audience that we were going to go through three main themes. The first one is indeed, what is the Islamic dimension of Turkish politics and what does it mean for Turkish secularism? The second one will be about the populist aspect of Erdogan's politics, and we will end up discussing what the current pandemic situation is doing to the Erdogan regime, but also the geopolitical position of Turkey more generally. So let me introduce the first theme about Islam and Turkish politics. So the intriguing point where we all start is that Turkey has always been presented across different scholarship as the exceptional case of a secular, quote-unquote, Muslim country. And so in this narrative, Islamism is usually seen as a protest or reaction against the secular nature of the state. While I do not completely disagree with this presentation, I have also some reservation on not looking enough or not in depth of the nature of Islam within the building of the modern nation states, not only in Turkey, but across the Muslim world. And one point I have made several times, and I'm not the only one making this point, is that the status of Islam, even in secular Turkey, cannot be understood understood if we do not go back to the foundational moment of the Turkish nation. And in this particular aspect, Turkey was not built on a rejection of Islam, quite the opposite, actually, despite the rhetoric of Kemal Atatürk. Kemal Atatürk came from a tradition that you can call modernist, westernizing, but his main goal was to, I would say, disciplinize Islam or adjust it to the frame of the nation state, not to get rid of it. And by doing so, he built a new way of being Muslim and being Turk, knowing that there was no Turkish identity as such until the collapse of the Ottoman Empire. And I think it's important to keep this in mind, because we think that nations are given, that they are sort of spontaneous political, cultural community in which you are immersed forever, while the scholarship is really clear on that. Nation is a modern political construct. You cannot look at nation before, I would say, modern times. So the tendency to try to create a sort of continuity between the Ottoman period and the modern period does neglect the fact that until Turkey, there is no nation state. And that actually, unlike what people think looking at the Western history, there is a state before there is a nation. And this is not particular to Turkey. You can look at it also in the case of Pakistan. You can look at it in the case of lots of countries that were born through the push and impulse of a very tiny, modernist, westernized elite everywhere in the post-colonial world, and they build the institution and also the political culture, and most importantly, the socialization that will create something that was unprecedented, which is the collusion between national belonging and Islamic belonging. And this, again, was not an invention of the Islamist party. This was an invention of the Kemalist republic, in a way that didn't exist in the Ottoman Empire. You could be Ottoman, but being Turkish in modern time will mean I am a member of Islam, and the dominant school of Islam will be included, absorbed in the modern state institution in a way that cannot be compared to the very loose existence and independence of all Islamic institutions under Muslim empires. Of course, the Caliph tried to control, and they did control, but the structural independence in terms of finance, in terms of endowment, in terms of training, meaning the ulema were not controlling their training by the Caliph, and especially the education system in the modern nation that is centralized under the state institution and create homogenization across different groups. All this created what I've called in my work hegemonic Islam, which means that you are Muslim by default in the modern Muslim nation, even if you are not a Muslim, even if you are Alevi or Christian. And this is something that has to be taken into account to understand the Islamist phase of Turkey, in which, interestingly, Erdogan didn't contest the secular nature. He didn't have to, in the sense that the belonging to Islam and the belonging to Turkey was already there. What he contested is the legitimacy of behaving as a Muslim in public space. And it was very fascinating to see how the Erdogan discourse was, we want to be more pluralist than the Kemalist republic, because we want to include in the community, or at least in the behaving of the citizen, a way of being also religious and not only secular, in the sense here, meaning not being religious in public space. So this is all this complexity that sometimes I'm a little disappointed to see disappearing by trying to create continuity between different historical periods, and missing out on the modernity of the building of the nation state. And again, here Turkey is not unique, but we are discussing Turkey. So I would like Erdi to engage with me on that particular aspect.
I mean, while I'm listening to you, I realize that when I read first time, like your awakening of Muslim democracy and what is political Islam, I've been cited a lot, and I've been like right now traveling in the pages of these two amazing works. I mean, as you mentioned, Turkey is a very complex and multi-dimensional case regarding the studies of religion and politics, and religion and foreign policy as well. I'm sure we will discuss about it. As you said, like the where is standing Islam? What is the role of Islam during the establishment period of the contemporary Turkey? These are very big questions. I think there are many reductive interpretations regarding the role of religion from the very beginning of the establishment period of the contemporary Turkey. One reductive interpretation is that Turkey is a secular country. As Ahmet Kuri mentioned in his 2009 book, I mean, we had two types of secularism, if I'm speaking very broadly, the Anglo-Saxon and the French version, right? But at the same time, we have a Turkish style of secularism, and I would be one of the rare academics who has been using not secularism when we are mentioning about Turkey, because if we talk about Turkey as a secular country, we would make a very big mistake. Turkey is a laïc country. I mean, I would insist to use this word instead of secularism, which is laïc, because Turkey tried to define itself as a laïc country from its constitution since 1937. But at the very beginning of the establishment period, even before the official declaration of the Republic in 1923, since the beginning of 1920s, and then previously during the Ottoman modernization period, there is a laïc league that you use the disciplinized religion. I think it's a fascinating term, but I'm using the management of religion. I mean, I wouldn't say the Kemalist regime put in prison to Islam, but instead they realized that Islam is a very big focal point of the Ottoman Empire. And if we will create a nation state, I think it is a very difficult decision for them to establish a nation state in Anatolia after the Ottoman Empire, which was one of the biggest empire of the world, and Anatolia is one of the main migration paths of the world, and it's impossible to define who is Turk, who is not. And we know that right now we have more than like 50 million Kurds at the same time. But within this Turkification process, I mean, Islam is very important, and the Kemalist regime realized that if we're gonna create a national state, a modern national state, we have to manage Islam. But how? Because we know that despite the caliphate's indisputable authority in Anatolia, there are historically more than 30 religious communities. I mean, the tarikats, jamaats. And the Kemalist establishment, the Kemalist regime was very much aware that religion is something very much related with politics, and religion could be sometimes a justification tool or a glue or a kind of a political tool. And they didn't want to give any group, any person, any kind of a community, any kind of a political tool. So they decided to control religion with one institution, which is called the Diyanet, the Presidency of the Religious Affairs. And it is very actually important that the Constitution of Turkey decided that Turkey is a laïc state in 1937, but they established Diyanet right after 5 months the establishment of Turkey. What is the role of Diyanet? Actually, Diyanet is not a new institution in Anatolia. We know that during the Byzantine Empire, there is always an institution to control, to regulate, to manage the religious activities on behalf of state, and also for state, and also for the society. So this is a very complicated situation. And during the Ottoman Empire period, there is a Sheikhul Islam, and there is a ministry which has been controlling the Islamic issues, Islamic affairs for state, and instead of that, Kemalist regime established Diyanet. What is the role of Diyanet? Diyanet's role is to supply the religious services. But what kind of religious services? It's a religious service which was dedicated, which was like described from the state, and that means that state is the only owner and the controller of the Islam, and this Islam is particularly Sunni Islam because they didn't want that much pluralism. If you would like to be a Turk, you have to be a Sunni Muslim, but in this Sunni Muslim, you're using and instrumentalizing politics, instrumentalizing Islam for political purposes should be very limited. In here, I think the Kemalist regime did something very crucial. I mean, in my forthcoming book, I defined the some categories regarding the instrumentalization of Islam or the using of Islam by the Turkish citizens. The first one is that believing category. You should believe some religion, and then you should belong some religious communities or some institutions if you're in Turkey, because being alone is quite difficult because of these crowded populations of the religious communities, and then you're going to behave according to your believing and belonging communities. Kemalist regime tried to control this belonging category. If you would like to be a believer of the Sunni Islam, you have to belong to the Kemalist Islam, which is defined by Diyanet. This is the main focal point. This means that the Turkish laicity is not a clear cut between mosque and politics, between religion and politics. Instead, it is a kind of a management and the control of Islam by state for the purposes of the state's sovereignty, state's sustainability. So, but I mean, throughout the period, mostly like there is another reductive interpretation about the using of an Islam for the political actors in Turkey. What is that reductive interpretation is that, I mean, most of the right-wing political parties using Islam for the purpose of their political aims. I think it is a very wrong connotation, because, I mean, we know that even though the social democrat parties like the Republican People's Party also used religion and Diyanet for their purposes, because Diyanet is a giant organization in Turkey. I mean, controlling like thousands of mosques, like the employing thousands of imams, and reaching the citizens of Turkey. But what changed since the foundation period and the foundation period of Turkey and currently Erdogan regime? The first thing is that, I mean, the instrumentalization of Islam has been like increased a lot, because what they realized that in Anatolia, it is not possible to reach in every single state, in every single community, in every single members of the society via political tools or via other laic institutions. But instead, I mean, it's very easy to use religion to control this society, to send them their messages. And throughout the years, most probably the right-wing parties, also with a combination and the collaboration with the Sunni communities, use Islam. There is a very interesting quote in my book that I conducted an interview with the previous head of Diyanet, Mehmet Görmez. He confessed that even though Diyanet should be the only authority which has to be control the religious activities in Turkey, due to the lack of the state capacity, they started to create some kind of informal coalitions with some communities since the beginning of 1960s. That means that, I mean, the Turkish secularism or laicity is a big balloon. Actually, it is a kind of a management game for the political purposes. But during the Erdogan term, you were right. I mean, in your book, The Awakening of Muslim Democracy, which, if I'm not mistaken, published in 2014, it's a great time for publishing in terms of Turkey, because this is a very, I mean, the critical junction for Turkey. Because after that period, Erdogan tried to control all of the religious communities in Turkey, and where the issues are getting very complicated, or we will talk about where the populism play a role, or also the political leaders' new role as the global or the national imam for Turkey. Because after that period, I mean, all of these religious communities functions has been a little bit disappeared, because right now in Turkey there is a political party which has been instrumentalizing Islam very cleverly, not only for an instrument but also for an objective. But in here, the main point is that, the question is that, I mean, I've been reading many opinion pieces and even academic articles claim that Turkey is not a laïc country anymore. No, instead, Turkey is still a laïc country, because laiclik, Turkish laiclik, is not a ideological thing. It is actually a methodology. If we are talking about Turkish laiclik, we should know, we should be aware that it is a kind of a methodology to describe how political power, political authority, and actually states can use religion for its political purposes. So it is a methodology, it is not an ideological mindset. Right now, what is going on? Right now, there is a president, he has been trying to control all the state apparatuses, one way or another, with different coalitions. We will talk about it most probably, and using Islam to reach his purposes. So Turkey is still a laïc country, and I think it is quite impossible for the future connotations to think that Turkey will not be a laïc country. No, Turkey will stay as a laïc country on the constitution, but the instrumentalization of Islam might be changed according to the governments, or according to the political parties or the political leaders who can control the state apparatus. Because before Erdogan, as you mentioned, that the differences between government and state was very clear. I mean, state was in a very Kemalist mentality to secure the laïc state identity of Turkey. But right now, after like pretty much 20 years, the Erdogan's regime, we saw that there is a separal structure with the state, with the Justice and Development Party and the AKP's informal coalition actors, coalition partners that has been changing dramatically day by day, and then the religious communities, with this eclectic structure right now controlling all the system. But in here again, I would say that Turkey is still a laïc country, and if we can define Turkey as a secular, we would make a very big mistake. But we should, I think, underline that Turkish laicity is not a kind of a ideological principle. It is a kind of a methodological obligation coming from history, coming from praxis, and also this praxis is not only used in Turkey right now, it is also using internationally, and I think it is very important code to understand the Turkish state identity. So this is the things that I would say about the, like, as an opening remark, if you will continue to discuss about the Turkish laicity.
So thank you, Erdi. A couple of points I would like to raise from your remarks. The first one, I agree about laiclik. By the way, it's about laïc. There was some question in the Q&A about laïc. It comes from the French laïcité, but there is a Turkish version of it. So this is impossible to remove from the modern political Turkish way, you know, of either democratic or more authoritarian. That's the point. That's a given. Having said that, I would not say that what Kemal did was only managing. Managing means you do not really touch at the organization of the structure. The Diyanet completely restructured Islam. Because the Diyanet obeys the logic that is a modern political logic. That's why I don't think that the Byzantine were a state. An empire and a state are not the same. The feature of the state is rational legal bureaucracy. This is true everywhere. It's not only true for Islam. It's true in any process of modernization. And once you are at this level of governance, it means that you are getting very deep into transforming the institution that you are putting under the auspices or under the umbrella of the state. The Diyanet is not just an institution out there with the state having connection with it. It's part of the state. It's a state institution. And in this particular aspect, the reform went up to the status of the clerics, the status of the transmission and education. I mean, the Diyanet is based on something that is unique, which is also to include non-Islamic background or trained actors within the Diyanet, which was unheard before. That's why I do not think that there is a continuity in there. There is a change, and it's not managing. It is really reshaping Islam to make it fit within the state institution. But this is not even enough, because it is not only about state action. It is not only about control or instrumentalization. It is all about changing the mentality, the way that citizens think of themselves. Nations, the national identity is not any kind of political identity. Again, being part of the Byzantine Empire doesn't make you a national. And the changes are actually, with this I agree, the changes are not back to the period of the peak of classical empire. They are back at the time where the Ottomans are dealing with modern concepts. So the changes appear there. Kemal Atatürk come from the Young Turks. And there is a whole discussion about, indeed, what is this new political community? Is it Ottoman? Is it national? Is it Islamic? There are lots of competing alternative here. And the good way is indeed to look at this phase before the collapse of the Ottoman Empire, because the Ottoman Empire is not like a kind of unique, homogenized entity for centuries. It did change. And what you are referring to are political debates that are already in the modern phase. And Atatürk, you can bring him or connect him with this particular story, but certainly not with all the management, I would say, or relationship between the caliph and the different bodies of religious groups. That's an important point. So in this sense, indeed, there is a continuation and a reform and a restructuration of what religion, and especially Islam, meant for the modern political community that is a nation. And here I want just to insist on two things. When we talk about secularism, we are automatically getting into what I call the ideology of the secularization process. There is an ideology. Secularism is not a concept, it's an ideology. Jose Casanova has said it brilliantly. There are lots of expectations about the term secularism. So when you say it from a Western point of view, it means separation of state and religion. It means privatization of religion in society and decline of personal religiosity. And you can try to fight against that. The scholars are still having or debating with these three elements together, while what we see historically is the impossibility of these three elements to coexist in any new or modern secular political entity everywhere. Think of India. India is even more fascinating. There is no separation, no privatization, no decline of personal religiosity. India is a secular country. So when I look at Turkey, what do I see? There is no separation. There is, in fact, the opposite that didn't happen before in the pre-modern phase, which is an institutionalization, rational legalization of Islam within the state institutions. So, and in this sense, it is likely, in this sense, I agree with you. And that's what I call disciplinization. It means here we are, it's controlling, it's disciplining, it's changing Islam to make it at the service of the state interest. That's okay. I mean,
sure.
But what is happening is the second level. What Atatürk did very well, and I think nobody wants to go back to the stage before, is rejection of Islam in social life. in the public space, in the way that you deal with visibility of religious signs, with practice of Islam in public space. This is something where indeed the Kemalist politic was very thorough. The third element, I'm not even sure, it doesn't mean that Turks are not believers or practitioners. I'm not sure about that. So the thing that Kemalists did was indeed the removal, a pushback of Islam within a more either personal or a mosque kind of practice, but not automatically needing to be a practitioner, an observant Muslim to be a citizen, but belonging to the Islam restructured to the state institution. Yes, this was making you a good citizen. And I think that that's the domain on which Erdogan and the Islamist Party have been the most active, on trying to push back on behaving as a good Muslim or practitioner or observance of Islam, and at the same time being being a Turk. And so it doesn't challenge indeed like click, but it challenged the second level on which the Kemalist politic has been the most proactive, and I would say authoritarian. You do not make the changes that were made by Kemal Atatürk if you are a Democrat. This has to be authoritarian, and it became so authoritative in the sense that that's what now everybody is expecting from the good civic behavior in Turkey. And so these are elements we have to be very clear of what we are talking about. So indeed, no secularism, but likely indeed institutional and social as well. So I would like to hear you about that. Yeah.
I think we have been talking pretty much the same issues via different terminology using the different discourses. First of all, yes, you are very much right that like this laiclic is inspired by the French, because likewise all the young Turks, Mustafa Kemal has been reading a lot about the French literature, particularly Jean-Jacques Rousseau. I mean, in his mausoleum, there is they opened his library. He read all the Jean-Jacques Rousseau's with highlighting some sentences. It's definitely kind of an inspiration from the French laiclic. But why I'm saying the management, I mean, yes, disciplinized, which is true, but at the same time, in the establishment of during the establishment period of Turkey, I mean, I'm saying management because, I mean, one way or another, how Mustafa Kemal and his, like the founding fathers of Turkey, tried to create a kind of a proper Turkish citizen. They also tried to create a proper Turkish Islam, which has been defined by Diyanet. And also, I mean, I said institutionally, the continuation is definitely institutionally following from Byzantium and then the Shaykhul Islam and the Ministry of the Sharia and Efkaf in Ottoman Empire and this Diyanet, the institutional constitution. There is an institution. I'm saying the state apparatus, not an institution in my works, because I mean, it's an apparatus of the state, Diyanet. Kemalist regime tried to also establish its own ulema via Diyanet. So this ulema can easily disciplinize, shape, and reorganize the Islamic values according to the political purposes of the state. I'm not sure about the Kemalist regime. There are some studies, but in 2016, I published an article, and I compared Erdogan's declarations regarding some critical junctions of the Turkish politics and then the Diyanet's fatwas and Diyanet's declaration. For example, Erdogan said that I think it is not good to wear a white shirt for the men. Diyanet said exactly the same thing during their fatwas, the Friday sermons, exactly what Erdogan says. It was the same for the Kemalist regime. It was the same for the Democrat Party regime. It was the same for the coalition governments. And also, even it was the same during the military regime periods. I mean, when we look at the, I just published an article with Professor Mehmet Gürses. I mean, we compare the mosque numbers throughout the years. And what we realized that the most increasing time for the mosque numbers is during the military regimes and the Justice and Development Party, Erdogan regime. So that means that military has also used that's like the Diyanet, and also not only the Diyanet, the religious communities. This is the one point. I mean, I think this continuity and the captures and the continuity is quite important. There is a continuity in terms of the institutional level. There is an institution, there is a state apparatus, there is some structure, but this is the continuity part. But the capture is that you are definitely right. There was an ulema during the Ottoman Empire period, even though there are many problems with this ulema that Ahmet Kuru mentioned in his recent book, Authoritarianism and Islam. But Mustafa Kemal and the following leaders and the state also try to, and actually they managed to establish their own ulema. Therefore, I think there is another reductive interpretation is that some scholars claim that, Diyanet has its own mindset. Yes, indeed, it is an institution. It's a giant institution, very powerful institution, very influential institution. But, Diyanet cannot say anything radical compared to state. Yes, there are some competing periods. There are some, little tensions between the Diyanet and the state. But if there is some actor or a political party or a structure can control the state structure fully, it is very hard for them, it is very hard for Diyanet to reject the ideas of the state, reject the ideas of the political structure and claim their own arguments. So in this regard, I'm very much, most probably I will use this disciplinized terminology while referring this, citing this webinar. But yes, you're right, this is disciplinized. But I would say like the management, regulation, disciplination, all is at the same time in one package. And right now, if we're gonna come to the contemporary time, there is as I said, there are many people say that there is a desecularization period or delaicization period of Turkey. No, I said no. Secularization issues is a different issue, as you said, it's an ideological issue. It's about many different dynamics, but the Turkish state's using laïc identity and laïc methodology is still there, and this laïc identity is very functionable, is very, it is a very nice and adaptable methodology. If you can be a populist leader, you can adapt it. If you can be an authoritarian leader, you can be adapted. If you can be a pluralist leader or a democratic leader, you can also adapt this laïc methodology in many different ways. And right now, because of these controlling, disciplinized and the management issue, current Erdogan regime and his informal, unconventional coalition partners in Turkey, like the nationalists or the Euro-Asians, not only instrumentalize and use this Diyanet and the other religious communities via laïc principle, laïc methodology, not only at home, but also outside Turkey. So Turkey is also very sophisticated and a complicated example to see that this is not only affecting the Turkish citizen, this is also affecting the diasporas. This is also affecting the other Muslim communities in the Balkans, in the North Africa, in the Turkey countries, and in Europe. Germany, there have been pretty much more than 4 million Turks. Diyanet and the religious communities is also very active in these areas as well. So it is also very important to understand what does it mean, that laïc methodology, to understand how state can use that kind of a transnational state apparatuses in a multi-ways and with a collaboration with the other transnational state apparatuses, in abroad. And also one more point, you are very much right that since the beginning of the Kemalist regime, the state tried to establish its own ulema. Therefore, right now, we have been seeing a kind of a revival. Who's gonna be the next leader of the global ummah? Erdogan's Turkish Islam, or the Saudi Crown Prince, new Wahhabi Islam, or the Iranian Islam, or the Moroccan Islam. So that the Turkish Islam is also very essential, very focal, and a very dynamic point to understand the Turkish state. One last sentences, from your sentences and my own readings, I can easily claim that without understanding the complex structure of Turkish laïc methodology, the importance of Islam, it is almost impossible to make any comments regarding any single issue, what we are seeing in Turkey right now, instead of the Gülen movement and the AKP competition, or war, I would say war right now, or the coup attempt, or the current COVID-19 process, Erdogan's foreign policy, I mean, the issues regarding the European Union, USA, even with the Russia, even with the relations with the Cuba, Islam has been playing quite an important role. Today, I submitted a brief report to Peter Mandeville regarding the religious instrumentalization of religious soft power. We can see the reflections of the Turkish Islam and instrumentalization of this Turkish Islam. Even in Cuba, the Muslim population is 0.01%. It is super complex, but also it is super influential.
Yeah, so let's move on to the second aspect, which is populism. But to wrap up on that, I think we agree that this clique is not about autonomy of religion. And again, that's something to keep in mind, because when people think secularism, they think separation or differentiation. What happened on the laïc clique is loss of autonomy by, I'm not talking about religion here, I'm talking about buildings, about bodies, about text, about practice. This is very heavy in terms of the systematicity, and this systematicity is modern. We can, I mean, I'll be happy to continue outside the seminar about, you know,
whenever you
or not, but so let's move on to populism, because as you know, this has become a major new research interest across East and West.
Mm-hmm.
So again, we cannot open here the Pandora box of defining populism, because nobody agrees about it. But let's say, to make our life simple, at least for this purpose, that you would call populist any group or party that will refer to we the people against another. And the other may not be automatically within the nation, it can be also outside the nation. And so it's we all belong to these people, whatever the features are, and we are anti-system.
Mm-hmm.
And we privilege a sort of charismatic leader. So these are the three minimal features on which scholars would agree to look at populism. So there is a debate about populism in Turkey, pretty much associated with the status of Erdogan as a political leader. So would you agree with some of the scholarship that is now looking at the AKP and Erdogan as a populist group or movement? First, AKP as a populist group, and Erdogan as a populist, as a leader or charismatic leader. What is your take on that?
Actually, Erdogan wasn't a populist leader. Erdogan, at the same time, was a populist leader for a short while a period, but right now he's not a populist leader. So, I mean, my answer is yes and no. So, to explain my idea, I mean, it is 20 years, and Turkey is a very dynamic country, and dynamic in every single sense, in every single point. So, I mean, we can't categorize Erdogan's term in, like, I think it's very hard to fix Erdogan's regime, Erdogan's period in one book or one study. So I think it's better to categorize the Erdogan's term. I mean, it is true that Erdogan's AKP reached the power as a catch-all party. I mean, they got a very huge support from liberals, from some social democrats, Turks, like Muslims, so on and so forth. And it was very true that they had it's kind of a motto. Now I'm translating in my mind to English. I mean, we are sitting in the power position, but we are not eligible to run the country. It was very much true, because Turkey is not a newly funded state. I mean, Turkish state heritage, I mean, the Turks state heritage, quote unquote, I mean, is older than 2,000 years old. So, I mean, the Turkish state mentality, Turkish state capacity is quite big. Between 2002 and 2007, I would say that, I mean, they were in the populists. I mean, they were trying to do something. We don't know whether they were their real aim, or they just want to act like that due to get the supports of the liberals, or supports of the international audience, European Union, United States, so on and so forth. But after 2007, like between 2013, I would say that they've been trying to act a little bit of populist, because they were eligible to do everything, and then there was a kind of an unconventional and informal partnership with the Gülen movement and other liberal modest, I'm saying quote unquote, liberal modest religious communities. They did pretty much, good and bad things, but like in this period they were a little bit populist, because the military wasn't that powerful. The state regime or the establishment Kemalist regime was not that powerful, but they didn't do what they want. But after 2013, I think it is very hard to define Erdogan as a populist leader, because one way or another, I think it is best to define the Erdogan's political methodology or interpretation of the politics with an Aristotelian term, like a political animal. I'm not saying something pejorative. I'm saying something very professionally implementing the political tools, because he's like his and his team, I'm not sure like current team, but the previous team is coming from the roots of the politics. They have been in the politics from the youth branches of the national outlet movement when they were like 16, 17 years old. So they know what does it mean politics, and they know what is Turkish state, because they've been coming to the power within a struggle with the Turkish state mentality, Kemalist establishment. But after 2013, Erdogan is not a populist. Erdogan is a very pragmatist. And also, likewise, every political animal, he's been like changing it is political partners and informal coalition partners quite easily. And he did actually what he said. He did like regarding some like the transformation about the showing of dialogue or the implementation of the Islam in the public state. He did. He claimed and he treated the Kurds in many different ways, and he did. He would like to change the system. He did. He did everything what he said. There are a couple of studies which has been published by Ömer Tekdemir. I know his works very well. He said like Erdogan was a populist, but not right a populist, because one way or another, not maybe directly, but via indirectly, he said what he said. He did what he said. He did what he claimed. So it is very hard right now to define Erdogan as a populist. But what we can say that he might be a very populist, we can smell Erdogan as a populist leader, because he has been changing his discourse very rapidly. He has been changing his political decisions very rapidly, because he's not alone. I think this is the very problematic point to observe Turkey from outside, or from outsiders' observation, because they see that Erdogan is the one and only the leader who can run all of the country while controlling all the state structure and instrumentalizing Islam and the nationalism and the authoritarianism at the same time. Yes, he's an authoritarian leader. It is obvious that there is no question about it, but he is not alone, because he's standing at the top, but he's been creating very different coalitions with the Eurasianists, with some former Kemalists, with the nationalists, with the National Movement Party at the same time. So he's not alone, and his cadre is not capable to run all of the country. So right now, Erdogan is not populist, but his image seems very strong, very powerful, but his influence and his capacity is not very influential and strong. He needs to establish different type of coalitions, and he needs to establish different type of short or a midterm agreement with different groups. So it seems that he's a populist. He's been changing his discourse. He's been changing very different ways. He has been trying to make happy very different groups in Turkey, but this is because he's very fragile right now. He's on the top position right now, but like not a very strong top. I think in this level, the wind is quite strong as far as I can observe the Turkish politics right now. So I would say that right now Erdogan is not a populist leader, but to enforce his power, he's been acting as if he's a populist, and he's been, and particularly during the election periods, he's been using a very populist discourse, but instead of the elections and outside the election processes, he's not a populist leader at all.
Thank you. I think we agree on that. Indeed, there was a phase where it was for the consolidation of its legitimacy to to look at the system as we are weakened within the system, with the, you know, the necessity to convene the army, to be part of the whole institutional establishment. But you're right, this phase has passed, and we cannot argue that it's populist anymore.
Well, it was an old Turkey. Now we are in a new Turkey.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I completely agree with that. I would like, if you don't mind, we're going to move to the question because we have a few that are very interesting. And if you want, you can fold in some elements on the COVID situation. But I would like to go through some of the questions. So the first one is about the Diyanet. I think you are seeing it as I do.
Yeah, I'm seeing it as well, yeah.
So Diyanet in the foundational period was also responsible for controlling religious interpretation and limiting the possibility of its political use. Therefore, it was about consolidation of power. Does this translate to the approach of the AKP today? Maybe regarding the Alevi, and if yes, in what way?
I mean, in the foundation period of Turkey, there was a single party period since the beginning of 1950s. So, I mean, so in this regards, it's impossible for Diyanet to block any kind of a political uses from the other political parties because there wasn't any political party. So, but I mean, controlling religious interpretations and limiting the possibility of its political use, I think this is also a little bit an oxymoronic issue for Diyanet because it is a political state institution. I mean, Diyanet is not a free Islamic institution or a free Islamic community, or it's not an historical institution like LSR to interpret their or announce their free religious ideas about Islam. They've been controlling, I mean, they've been getting salaries from the state, so it's impossible to think that they've been thinking very differently than the state. Yes, indeed, there are some periods they've been discussing with state in some different issues, but it is not very visible. And I would categorize the Diyanet's issues throughout Diyanet's functions throughout the years. I would say that it was a quote unquote the protector of the Turkish Islam by the states, and then it became a promoter and the protector of Turkish Islam both at home and abroad. And now it is a kind of a handy state apparatus of the AKP regime or the new Turkey, both at home and abroad. So it is a kind of a propaganda machine, or it's a kind of a very actively used, very giant and powerful political institution. This is my answer for this question, actually.
Okay, so there is a question about the new parties. We have not talked enough about that, like Future Party, Diva Party. How would they keep nation and state in the same kind of combination, or would they?
This is also another problem regarding to the Turkish citizens. I mean, from our education system, we learned that what does it mean? What is the definition of laiklik from higher education? But I don't know, maybe from primary education, we learned that Turkish laiklik means that the separation of the religion affairs and the state affairs. No, I mean, it's not like that. But all the political parties repeating these sentences: we will institute, we will consolidate, we will enforce the laiklik understanding of Turkey. But there is no laiklik understanding. There is a methodology. So the new party is always saying that they're going to enforce the parliamentary regime, because right now there is a problem about the parliamentary regime after 2017 referendum in Turkey. I mean, they've been not talking about religion, but even though, I mean, everyone is a little bit, I mean, unhappy regarding to the overdose of the instrumentalization of Islam for the political purposes and the religious community's visible activities to capture some of the state institutions and to capture some of the wealth from the state. And right now all of the alternative political parties claim that they're gonna minimize the instrumentalization of religion for political purposes, but I'm pretty sure that they're going to instrumentalize both Diyanet and other religious institutions for their political purposes. Because if you're going to consider yourself as a political actor, why wouldn't you use that kind of an influential institution? I mean, the politics means that to capture the power, right? And transform the society. And you have a giant institution and giant communities. So why wouldn't you use? Indeed, they're using, and their instrumentalization would be different than the AKP, because there wasn't a figure likewise Erdoğan. Erdoğan is a kind of a figure. Yes, he's a very charismatic figure, at the same time very influential. What he knows what does it mean politics, what does it mean real politics, but at the same time he is promoting himself as a Muslim leader at the same time. And this Muslim leader is not only for Turkey, it's also for all around the world. He's promoting himself as a guardian, protector, and the representative of the Muslims all around the world. I mean, if you're going to follow the pro-AKP news outlets in Turkey, you can see that the Erdoğan has been always ranking on the first rank during the some of the surveys in Pakistan, in Bulgaria, in Afghanistan, in some in Northern African countries as the most popular Muslim leader. So, I mean, the Erdoğan's Muslim image, something could be very unique for the Turkish history, and I'm not sure we're going to see that Muslim figure in Turkey. But what happens regarding Erdoğan and the new parties? As you know, Erdoğan lost in the last municipality election, and the new the new mayor of Istanbul, Ekrem İmamoğlu, invited the cameras and the media to his office, to his room, and they prayed with one of the imams to celebrate his election success. I mean, this is a very good signature that even though the Turkey is still a laic country, the methodology of the laicity is still valid. The instrumentalization of Islam transformed all the political propaganda tools for all of the political parties. Also, there are some other studies how Kurdish political parties and the Kurdish movement using Islam in the Kurdish region, and we know the Kurds is one of the most secular societies in Turkey, ethnic groups in Turkey, but right now they've been also using the Islamic language or Islamic tools. So Islam instrumentalization and the using of Islam in politics in Turkey is a very acceptable and inevitable reality in the current circumstances.
Okay, I don't think we have the time. We can type answers later, lots of questions, but there is one that is really dealing with what we didn't address, which is the COVID situation.
I mean, the COVID-19 is a quite interesting case to explore the role of Islam. I mean, when we look at the domestic politics, Erdogan's one of the first statement was that we are Muslims, we are clean, we have been washing our hands, so there will be no COVID problem regarding COVID problem in Turkey. This was the first statement. Even though the Turkish health system is very strong, and the Turkish Turkey seems that struggling this disease very well, but also there is also another issue that Erdogan has been using this COVID-19 as a kind of a religious soft power tool. When we look at that, Turkey has been sending more than 60 countries humanitarian aid and the medical aid packages, and all these humanitarian aid packages sent by Diyanet, if there is a Diyanet office or a branch in these countries. Right now in the Balkans, in the North Africa, in Germany and in France, most of the packages has been distributing via Diyanet, and all of these packages, it's been written, there is some statement from Mevlana Celaleddin Rumi, which is quite a religious statement. And Erdogan has made a remark, one of the Friday sermons in his new policy, said that we have been supporting and helping these nations, these countries, because we are Muslims, we have to help these people. So still there is an instrumentalization of Islam, even though to fight with this pandemic.
Yes. The question is also, this is across the board, about the fact that the virus situation provides new resources for authoritarianism. Would you say that, even in the case of Turkey? Yeah.
I mean, I would define Turkey was still a competitive authoritarian regime, because Erdogan, like one way or another, lost the municipality regimes. I mean, I wouldn't say it's increased the level of the authoritarianism in Turkey, because it is. I think it's almost in the peak level. So I mean, where we should go? I mean, the next would be a permanent state of emergency, but we are not still there. But what would be the problem? The economy is very fragile in Turkey. The economic situation is, I mean, I would say, is beyond the shrinking conditions. So to control the economy, he might capture some of the municipalities, and this might be a new level in this authoritarianism. But I would say that even though Erdogan is an authoritarian leader right now, I know there are some manuscripts on preparing Erdogan, the autocrat. It might be true, but it is also true that he is very fragile. So he cannot be a fulfilled and authoritarian leader. But indeed, I mean, we will most probably observe a new sovereignty definitions and the national state definitions after COVID-19 process. I'm very much looking forward to observe Turkey.
One more thing, if you could in 1 minute address, because it came into two questions about the competition that you mentioned before between Saudi Arabia and Turkey to lead now the Muslim world, at least the Sunni part of it. How would you wrap up on that? And this will be our last take on the question.
I mean, this is my new topic actually. I would like to explore this issue over the last 2-3 years. I mean, there is a huge competition between the Saudi Arabia, Turkey, not only Saudi Arabia, Turkey. I mean, Iran trying to involve this competition, Morocco trying to involve this competition via transnational religious apparatuses, because they would like to serve the European Muslims, all the other minority Muslims all around the world, and also the Muslim majority countries who are very weak position in terms of economy. I mean, they've been trying to promote their Islam is better than the others, their institutions is better than the others. But the main problem is that if we compare the issues regarding the European Muslims, I mean, the European states is not allowed that competition, because they saw the Erdogan has been using the Islamic tools to create kind of an extraterritorial authoritarianism regarding other opposition groups, and the Wahhabi Islam is not very much compatible for their values according to their ideas. And the rest is that I mean, the Saudi Arabia is not right now a very positive image, but what we know that, I mean, the Cuba is a very funny example for this case. These two countries have been building mosques at the same street, and these two mosques are looking at each other, and they've been like capturing very small portions of the Muslims in Cuba. I mean, there will be an ongoing revival and the historical revival between these two countries. But I think at the end of the day, I want to be the futuristic as a scholar. I think it's a very risky and a dangerous thing. But I would say that if this revival will increase and will continue, these two parties will lost, because it's gonna be annoying and make very frightening to the foreign countries, because this revival will disturb the notion of Islam and the serving mission of the Islamic institutions all around the world. I think it's a very dangerous competition.
Thank you, Erdi. I think we have come to the end of our hour. There are lots of questions we didn't address. We can still respond to them in writing, and I think we should do that, if you don't mind doing that, Erdi, later on. I want to thank you all for being with us for an hour. Of course, we could not completely exhaust the questions, but at least we had a lively exchange on that. Thank you again, Erdi. Thank you to our audience, and see you soon in another session of the Religion and Nationalism series. Bye-bye now.